elevating the tabletop. To the nines, for the leaders of today and the visionaries of tomorrow.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9, English news as it should be.
Very good morning. You are watching News 9. I'm Karthik Malhotra, and on the show today, we'll bring you an exclusive that debunks Donald Trump's claim of boosting trade with Pakistan. Can Pakistan afford to increase trade with the US? That's the big exclusive that we will bring for you right here on the show today. Also on the show, we saw a historic rise on Monday on Indian stock markets, and that pretty much got shattered yesterday as markets slipped in the red territory. What's going to be the mood of the market? Avinash Gorakshakar will be here to discuss and explain to us. You are watching Morning Brief at 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. I'm Karthik Malhotra. First up, let's bring you the headlines that we're tracking for you this Wednesday morning. Hot summers ahead, but cool news coming from inflation as April inflation reduces to a 6-year low at just 3.16%. Indigo will restart its flight operations to and from JAMMU, AMRITSAR, Chandigarh, Leh, SRINAGAR and RAJKOT. Flight operations to resume starting today. Meanwhile, in the wake of Pakistan closing its airspace for India-bound and India-originated aircraft and airlines, Air India will now be using the Mongolian airspace for flights that go to North America. The prized possession of Pakistan's Air Force decimated by India, the J-10 maker AVIC CHENGDU aircraft, its stock crashed 9% yesterday after Prime Minister Modi's speech at Adampur Air Base. Meanwhile, the India and United Kingdom Free Trade Agreement is likely to augur well for Jaguar Land Rover cars that would be imported into India with a lower duty. That's the word coming in from the Tata Motors Chief Financial Officer. Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal will lead a team to Washington from 17th of May as trade talks between India and US on the bilateral trade agreement are likely to resume. Donald Trump has sealed a $600 million deal with Saudi Arabia. More promises being made by Donald Trump on his visit to the Gulf nations. And a News 9 exclusive, we will debunk Trump's trade boost with Pakistan, even as Donald Trump in Saudi Arabia at a conference in Riyadh reiterated that boosting trade with India and Pakistan has led to the ceasefire. We debunk those claims. And global news, Microsoft will lay off 6,000 workers globally. That's 3% of its workforce in a new cost-cutting move. Let's start with the top story that we're tracking for you. Data coming in last evening. India's retail inflation has eased to nearly a 6-year low at 3.16% for the month of April. And this comes mainly due to subdued prices of vegetables, fruits, pulses and other protein-rich items, creating enough room for the Reserve Bank of India to go ahead with another round of rate cut in the June monetary policy review. Now, the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index-based inflation, was at 3.34% in the month of March and 4.83% in April 2024. It was now recorded at 3.15% back in July of 2019. At 3.16% for April 2025, it's now nearly at a 6-year low. Now, the National Statistics Office data showed a sharp decline of 91 basis points in food inflation in the month of April 2025 in comparison to data from last month of March 2025. Now, the food inflation in the month of April is the lowest India has seen since October 2021, just as India was coming out of the Delta wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, food inflation in April was 1.78%, lower than the 2.7% in the preceding month and 8.7% in the year-ago month. Now, this by data released by the National Statistics Office on Tuesday. The Reserve Bank of India, which has been mandated to ensure inflation remains at 4% with a margin of 2% on either side, has slashed the key interest rate by 50 basis points in 2 tranches in the month of February and April. Now, the central bank has projected the CPI inflation for the financial year FY 25-26 at 4%, with Q1 at 3.6%, Q2 at 3.9%, Q3 at 3.8% and Q4 at a higher 4.4%. Meanwhile, the rural inflation was at 2.9% in April 2025 compared to a higher 3.25% in the preceding month. Urban inflation, meanwhile, declined just marginally from about 3.43% in March to 3.36% in April. According to the data, the highest inflation was in the state of Kerala at almost 6%, 5.94%, while the lowest was in the state of Telangana at just 1.26%. Remember, RBI's Monetary Policy Committee may now allow for an additional 75 basis points of rate cuts this calendar year after cutting rates already twice in the month of February and April by 25 basis points each. Moving on now, Indigo scheduled flights from 6 airports, including Jammu and Amritsar, will progressively resume operations from today. On Monday, the airline had cancelled its flights to and from Jammu, Amritsar, Chandigarh, Leh, Srinagar and Rajkot for yesterday, that's Tuesday. Now, in a post last evening, Indigo said scheduled operations to and from Jammu, Amritsar, Chandigarh, Leh, Srinagar and Rajkot will progressively resume from the 14th of May, that's today. Each flight is being reinstated with meticulous coordination, ensuring every journey is seamless and secure as well as on track. This as per the Indigo statement that was released yesterday. These 6 airports are among the 32 airports that were reopened for civilian flights on Monday after being temporarily shut in the wake of the military conflict between India and Pakistan. Now, yesterday, Air India and SpiceJet resumed flights to Srinagar, while Air India Express operated services to Jammu. And staying with the airline space, Air India has started using the Mongolian airspace, which is northeast of China, for a few of its North American flights from the national capital as an alternative route for reducing operational costs that have jumped due to the Pakistan airspace closure last month. This according to a PTI report. Now, besides, the carrier is taking a technical stop in Kolkata for some of the North America flights from New Delhi. The Tata Group-owned airline has been exploring alternatives for the services from the national capital to North America in order to reduce flying time as well as its own operational expenses. At present, Air India operates as many as 71 flights a week to North American destinations, and out of them, 54 services are from the national capital of India, New Delhi. The airline flies to Chicago, New York, Washington, San Francisco and Newark in the US and to Toronto and Vancouver in Canada. Now, mostly the Mongolian airspace is used by some of Air India's flights from San Francisco and Vancouver. The flights from Delhi to these 2 cities are mostly using the Pacific route as per the PTI report we cited earlier. The flights AI-186 from Vancouver to Delhi and AI-174 from San Francisco to New Delhi have been using the Mongolian airspace for the past few days, as per information from flight tracking website flightradar24.com. Having a stop in a European city means higher expenses, including landing charges and fuel costs, according to the report. The alternative also helps in addressing challenges of higher fuel burn, operational expenses and flying duty time limitation for the Air India crew. Now, in the wake of retaliatory measures taken by India after the Pahalgam terror attack on April 22nd that killed 26 people, Pakistan closed its airspace for Indian Airlines on April 24th. The airspace closure has resulted in longer flying hours, higher fuel consumption, payload and aircraft availability issues, as well as crew flying duty time limitation challenges for airlines operating international flights to the West. India, remember, also closed its airspace for Pakistan Airlines on April 30th. Now, remember, on Saturday, India and Pakistan reached an understanding to stop all firing and military action on land, air and sea with immediate effect. The shares of Chinese aviation company, the J-10 maker AVIC CHENGDU aircraft, the maker of the prized J-10 fighter jets, saw a heavy sell-off on Tuesday, May 13th, a day after Prime Minister Narendra Modi's fiery address to the nation on India's successful Operation Sindoor against Pakistan-based terror camps and Pakistani military. Remember, AVIC CHENGDU aircraft share price crashed as much as 9.3% in intraday trade yesterday, the day Modi delivered a firm message from the Adampur Air Base to Pakistan, saying, not only have you failed to harm any of India's military installations, but you will be annihilated if terrorism continues from your soil. That was Prime Minister Modi's sharp message to Pakistan yesterday from the Adampur Air Base. Now, the stock price of Chengdu Aircraft Industries rose 50% last week, mainly attributed to the India-Pakistan conflict. Now, remember, the J-10C of the Pakistani military is the latest improvement to the J-10. The J-10 is a single-engine lightweight fighter developed by China's Chengdu Aircraft Industry Group, nicknamed the Fierce Dragon. The stock price recovered marginally in early trade today at the Shanghai Stock Exchange, up about 1.2% at 10:30 a.m. Shanghai time. The India-UK Free Trade Agreement augurs well to keep driving Jaguar Land Rover's performance in India, as it would benefit future cars and enable customers to access global cars and global prices much faster. This as per Tata Motors Group Chief Financial Officer PB Balaji. He said this in a conversation yesterday. Now, further details and clarifications are awaited to fully understand the impact on JLR after the US-UK trade deal has reduced US trade tariffs on auto exports from the UK to 10% from 27.5% within a quota of 1 lakh vehicles. Now, the current lineup of the Range Rover franchisee, which is the Range Rover Sport, Evoque and the Velar, are already being manufactured in India on a completely knocked down or CKD basis. So these won't really be impacted by the India-UK FTA as per initial understanding. Now, under the India-UK FTA concluded last week, tariffs on automotive imports will come down from over 100% to 10% under quotas on both sides, benefiting companies such as Tata Motors-owned Jaguar Land Rover. However, duty-free quota on EVs is limited only to a few thousand units every year. And staying with free trade agreements and bilateral trade agreements, Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal will lead a team of senior Indian officials to Washington starting May 17th for discussions with their US counterparts on the proposed bilateral trade agreement. This as per a report released yesterday. Now, during the visit, Piyush Goyal will hold meetings with US Trade Representative Jamison Greer and US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick on the agreement. The 4-day talks, which would start on May 17th and conclude on May 20th, come against the backdrop of both India and US exploring the possibility of an interim trade agreement in goods to secure early mutual wins ahead of finalizing the first phase of the trade agreement by fall of this year. That's likely between September and October this year. The report said the chief negotiators of both the countries will hold meetings from May 19th to May 22nd. Goyal will reach Washington on May 16th. The main issue that will figure in the negotiations include market access, rules of origin and non-tariff barriers. Now remember, India's proposal to impose retaliatory duty on certain US products over American tariffs on steel and aluminium would also figure in the bilateral trade agreement deliberations. Now, through these discussions, officials from New Delhi and Washington aim to take advantage of the 90-day tariff pause window to advance the talks. The US has suspended the additional 26% tariff on India till July 9th. It was announced on April 2nd to bridge the widening trade deficit that US has with India and the trade surplus that India enjoys with the US. However, the 10% baseline tariff imposed on the countries will continue to remain in place. Now, to further give impetus to the talks, India's chief negotiator for the bilateral trade agreement, Rajesh Agarwal, Special Secretary in the Department of Commerce and Assistant US Trade Representative for South and Central Asia, Brendan Lynch, had last month held 3-day talks in Washington. Just before that, in the month of March, GOYAL held bilateral meetings with Krier and Lutnick too. All right, time for us to slip into a very short break. But coming up on the other side, the mood of the markets after the historic rise on Monday and the sudden crash yesterday on Sensex. Avinash Gorakshakar will be joining us to explain what to expect from the market today and in coming days. You are watching Morning Brief at 9.
बेबो का एक ही रूल, रोज खाओ अंडे विदाउट भूल।
Cause eggs are cool, cool, cool. Yes, eggs are cool, cool, cool. Summer में एनर्जी हो जाती है कम, खाओ अंडे एनर्जेटिक रहो हरदम। Strength और power मिले हर रोज with proteins and minerals का daily dose. Eggs are cool, cool, cool. Yes, eggs are cool, cool, cool. Yes, eggs are cool, cool, cool.
संडे हो या मंडे, रोज खाओ अंडे।
मुस्कुराए लड़खड़ाए जिंदगी, चाहे जो भी हो।
सर, पेशेंट के लिए कौन सा रूम प्रेफर करेंगे आप?
जिंदगी भर के प्यार का कोई रेट कार्ड नहीं होता। टाटा AIG हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस, विद यू लाइक फैमिली, विद यू ऑलवेज।
How India's drones breached Pakistan's air defense.
The response of the Indian Armed Forces has been restrained and professional.
India responded by countering Pakistani attack.
Pakistan has grossly underestimated India's resolve.
Operation Sindoor was a massive success and impactful exercise by the Government of India.
The reaction of the international community on this particular instance after Pahalgam was to condemn the act.
Pakistan was unable to counter the Indian response.
We have gone about replying that in full force and full intensity.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Now, US President Donald Trump reiterated again yesterday that the US played a key role in brokering peace between India and Pakistan. Now, speaking in Saudi Arabia at Riyadh, Trump said he urged both sides to not trade nuclear missiles, but instead focus on trading things that they make so beautifully. The president also credited Secretary of State Marco Rubio for leading what he called a major diplomatic push, warning that millions could have died as the cross-border tensions threaten to lead to more destructions. Listen in to what Donald Trump said.
Days ago, my administration successfully brokered a historic ceasefire to stop the escalating violence between India and Pakistan. And I used trade to a large extent to do it. I said, fellas, come on, let's make a deal. Let's do some trading. Let's not trade nuclear missiles. Let's trade the things that you make so beautifully. And they both have very powerful leaders, very strong leaders, good leaders, smart leaders. And it all stopped. Hopefully it'll remain that way, but it all stopped. I was very proud of Marco Rubio and all of the people that worked so hard. Marco, stand up. What a great job you did on that. Thank you, J.D. Vance, Marco. The whole group worked with you, but it was a great job. And I think they're actually getting along. Maybe we can even get them together a little bit, Marco, where they go out and have a nice dinner together. Wouldn't that be nice? But we've come a long way, and that's could be, millions of people could have died from that conflict that started off small and was getting bigger and bigger and bigger by the day.
Well, US President Donald Trump there again trying to take credit for the cessation of military fighting between India and Pakistan. Remember, this also comes a day after clarification came through that it was not the call from Donald Trump or the US, but rather the DGMO of Pakistan's call to the DGMO of India at 3:35 p.m., which resulted in the cessation of hostilities. Well, following nearly 4 days of tense cross-border hostilities, India and Pakistan had entered a fragile ceasefire that took effect on May the 10th. US President Donald Trump is, again, like we saw, claiming credit for helping broker the pause in fighting, asserting it is not just a diplomatic breakthrough, but tied to trade interests. As US remains a key trading partner for both India and Pakistan, the scale of trade is far from balanced between India and Pakistan. With such limited economic leverage, can Pakistan's struggling economy keep up, or is it running out of options? Well, a special report by my colleague Krishna Kumar that explains and debunks the myth that Pakistan can indeed trade more with the US. Take a look.
After nearly a 4-day-long military action, India and Pakistan are now on a fragile cessation of firing that came into effect on the 10th of May. According to US President Donald Trump, the US played a key role in brokering peace between the two neighbors. On Monday, the US President claimed that the quote-unquote ceasefire, that's what he called it, was not just about diplomacy, but about trade. Remember, the US is the biggest export market for both India and Pakistan. But the trade relationship that the two countries enjoy with the US is far from equal. In the year 2024, total goods trade between the US and India was nearly $130 billion, while with Pakistan, it was just a little over $7 billion. India exported goods worth over $87 billion to the US in 2024, an increase of about 4.5% from the year 2023. Pakistan, on the other hand, exported just over $5 billion, up nearly 5% from the previous year. Imports also followed a similar pattern. India imported nearly $42 billion worth of goods from the US, while the Pakistan imports stood at a little over $2 billion. This gives India a trade surplus of over $45.5 billion with the US compared to Pakistan's $3 billion. Although the US trade tariffs are currently on pause until early July, new reciprocal tariffs of 26% on Indian goods and 29% on Pakistani goods have been announced. Both still face a 10% baseline duty on exports to the US. Pakistan's economy is in deep trouble. Its foreign exchange reserves are barely above $15 billion, while India holds over $688 billion. Pakistan's economy, worth just about $338 billion in 2023, is actually lower than it was in the year 2017. Meanwhile, inflation has gone through the roof from 10.7% in the year 2020 to 23.4% in the year 2024. Meanwhile, India is the fastest growing major economy in the world, slated to grow at 6.5% this year and eventually overtake Japan to become the fourth largest economy in the world by the end of this year itself. Remember, to avoid an economic meltdown, Pakistan made a last-minute appeal to the International Monetary Fund or IMF just hours before a key meeting. The IMF responded with a $1 billion bailout on the 9th of May. Yet, despite Pakistan's repeated hostile actions, the US continues to try to be a quote-unquote broker and not exactly a mediator. President Trump praised the powerful leadership of both India and Pakistan on the 10th of May without mentioning terrorism. While India and the US will soon restart trade talks in Washington, Pakistan and the US have agreed to deepen their strategic and economic ties, according to Trump. But with Pakistan's inflation soaring, foreign reserves barely above $15 billion, and a stagnant GDP, Pakistan is likely to be in no shape to sustain exports, especially to major markets like the US. So, while a claimed promise to boost trade is what Trump has said as his brokerage victory, Pakistan's ability to actually trade remains in serious doubt.
All right, Krishna Kumar there with that exclusive report on how it would be highly unlikely for Pakistan to be in a position economically to increase its trade with the US. Meanwhile, let's shift focus to the stock markets. Let's begin with what happened in the US. Well, Wall Street saw a mixed close on Tuesday with the S&P 500 and Nasdaq rising for a second consecutive day. This was driven by inflation numbers coming in lower than anticipated following the US-China trade truce announcements. The Dow, however, dropped by more than 0.6%. The S&P 500 gained over 0.7%, while the Nasdaq surged 1.6%. More details in this report.
Wall Street's main indexes ended mixed on Tuesday, with the Dow dropping more than 0.6%, the S&P 500 gaining over 0.7%, and the Nasdaq climbing 1.6%. Softer than expected inflation numbers added to investor optimism that carried over from Monday's announcement of a U.S.-China trade truce. The S&P 500 is now back in positive territory for 2025 for the first time since late February. Stocks nosedived after President Donald Trump unveiled global reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd. Brian Mulberry is client portfolio manager at Zacks Investment Management.
We've had this wall of worry from April 2nd and kind of coming back from that. I think really what has driven markets to this point is all of the worst case scenarios, the worst outcomes have kind of been taken off the table. That doesn't mean there aren't some tough answers out there ahead of us. There certainly are, but I think the really bad stuff has started to turn at least more neutral to positive at this moment in time. That's helping to fuel, I think, a better level of confidence in markets right now.
The Dow, however, was pulled down by a nearly 18% slide in shares of United Health Group after the insurance bellwether suspended its annual forecast and its CEO stepped down. Among other movers, shares of crypto exchange operator Coinbase Global surged almost 24% after an announcement that it is slated to join the S&P 500 on May 19th. And shares of American Eagle Outfitters, up more than 5% at the close, crashed 18% in extended trading after the apparel company withdrew its annual forecasts and took a $75 million inventory charge on its spring and summer collection due to economic uncertainty fueled by tariffs.
All right, that was the story coming in from the US Wall Street. And from US Wall Street, let's move to India's Dalal Street and look at the mood of the markets as they opened just about 15 minutes ago or so. Well, it seems to be a green start after the fall that markets saw yesterday. Remember, Monday was the big day where we saw the Sensex climb as much as 3,000 points before a major correction that came in the Indian stock markets yesterday. Nifty 50 also following a similar trend after almost 916 points rise on Monday. The trade on Tuesday saw a bit of a beating, but things are looking a little better this morning with Sensex and Nifty both higher up about 0.4% or so in the green. Let's look at the Nifty 50 heat map, and this is what we are making sense of right now as we speak. Well, very strange news coming in from Tata Motors, because Tata Motors, the profit declined by as much as 8,000 crore rupees or so That was the kind of dip that we saw in the earnings of Tata Motors, and that is weighing down very heavily on the Tata Motors stock in early trade today. Meanwhile, its competitors Mahindra and Mahindra, we see some action in the positive territory. It's up about 0.86% or so in early trade. Meanwhile, the IT sector is looking like a slightly healthier shade of green than what we would have liked to see perhaps, but this coming on the back of massive fall that we saw yesterday by way of all the bellwether IT stocks, Infosys, Tech Mahindra, Wipro, HCL, all registering massive losses yesterday. So that's the view coming in from the IT sector. Meanwhile, Reliance is up about 1% in trade this morning. In fact, all energy stocks are looking good. We've got ONGC up about 1.6%, Coal India up about a percentage point or so. Meanwhile, the banking space is looking quite muted today. Absolutely no change on the ticker for Kotak Mahindra Bank. It's absolutely flat this morning. Axis is up about 0.26. HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank also registering minor hints of green in early trade today. Let's look at the key indices and see where markets stand right now as markets opened just about 15 minutes ago or so. Like we told you, Sensex seems to be down now, down about 0.5%. Well, we will check that data again and come back to you. Meanwhile, Nifty 50 is up about 0.5%. Yeah, there you have it. Sensex is also up more than 0.5% in trade today. It's still below the 82,000 levels that one would like Sensex to see. But at about 81,600 points, Sensex is looking good, better than yesterday, but still a shade below where markets had reached on Monday. Meanwhile, Nifty 50 is up about 0.5%, well above the 24,700 levels, and mid cap and small cap faring much better than the main benchmark indices. The broader markets are up about 0.8 to 0.7% or so. Meanwhile, volatility, the fear index as we call it, volatility in the Indian stock markets has ebbed after what we heard from Prime Minister Modi yesterday, really giving another stern warning to Pakistan. Well, no further action expected, and that seems to be reducing volatility. And of course, great news coming in from the markets also on account of the softening of inflation and the expectation that the Reserve Bank of India could go ahead and cut interest rates again in the June Monetary Policy Committee meet. Well, let's try and unwrap all this. Avinash Gorakshakar, Head of Research, Profit Mart Securities, joins us this morning. Avinash, good morning. Lovely having you back here with us on News 9. Well, we saw a historic rise on Monday and then we saw a sudden crash yesterday, but things are looking better today. Is inflation and the expectation of RBI cutting rates driving the mood of the market this morning?
Yeah, I think good morning. I think inflation is definitely a big positive for us, and I think that is probably the reason the markets have opened in the positive. And I think clearly yesterday was a sell-off, considering the fact that day before the war ceasefire was like a big positive surprise, and most of the buying actually had come in from the retail side. So I think there was some correction expected. And I think today the action again has shifted to the defense companies. I think yesterday we saw a big bump up on stocks like Bharat Dynamics. Even today, we've been watching stocks like Garden Reach, which came out with a very stellar set of numbers, up by almost 13-14%. So I think the defense flavor continues to be in the market, plus larger companies like Bharti Hexacom, Bharti, these companies have put out much better than expected, the market expected, financial numbers. So I think obviously these companies will be doing their management calls today. But I think the mood in the market is that wherever the company's performance is good, the growth outlook is pretty positive. I think the markets are betting on such companies, and defense I think is clearly the flavor. Despite last 2 to 3 days, the stocks are continuously rising. So I would say that here also there could be a pocket of opportunity for investors who want to look at these companies from a longer term perspective. But I think the mood is definitely better. A lot of good news coming from the global markets, like the US-China deal, going to happen very soon. Plus, I think clearly, trade deal with India also in the pipeline, expected to be finalized very soon. So I think all said and done, this is definitely positive for the markets, and hopefully we have a good monsoon, Karthik. We can definitely expect a better April to June quarter.
Absolutely. I want to draw your attention also to energy stocks. Reliance, ONGC, Coal India, massive bump up in trade this morning. Reliance is up about, it started higher, but right now it's up about 0.6%. ONGC is up about a percentage point. Coal India more than a percentage. What's driving the momentum in energy stocks this morning?
I think clearly, there has been an uptick in crude price considering the fact that the global economy is now looking much better. And I think hopefully, it is quite obvious that if, there is some sort of comfort from the US markets, from China, I think definitely you're going to see a better kind of positioning for oil prices. Of course, higher crude prices would be temporarily be negative for oil marketing companies. But nevertheless, I think, companies like Reliance, markets are hopeful that their GRMs could improve, and I think the other businesses will also take off. My sense is that Reliance had come down to pretty lower levels, but I think markets are now looking for a much stronger April to June quarter and some sort of action at the Reliance AGM, which typically happens to be a very talked about event every year. So some expectation that maybe the retail business could be hyped up or some big announcement which the management would make at this point of time.
All right. Let's also talk about auto stocks, and again mixed cues coming in from there. One, of course, is the 51% fall in profits on Tata Motors, and that seems to be driving the Tata Motors stock down almost 2% in early trade today. But also some sense of positive news coming by way of the India-UK FTA, which will make JLR's entry into India much smoother. So mixed cues on Tata Motors, but stock taking a 2% beating primarily on the basis of Q4 results, isn't it, Avinash?
Yeah, I think, numbers were more or less in line with expectations, but the management did not give any guidance. Most importantly, that was the reason the markets were a little apprehensive going forward. But I think overall, if you look at the India-UK deal and plus the kind of clarity emerging in the US market on the tariffs issue, my sense is that at least after a couple of quarters, things would get back to normal. And again, markets are clearly also awaiting the split between the JLR and the domestic business, which I think also should happen in the next, say, 1 or 2 quarters. So I think, markets will definitely keep these factors in mind. So I think this fall is nothing to worry. I think probably markets will be looking at a better performance in FY26.
All right. And also talk to us about Hero MotoCorp, because Hero MotoCorp in fact registered almost a 6.4% growth in profits. And despite that, the stock is down about 1.5% today. That seems a little counterintuitive, doesn't it, Avinash?
No, I think, my guess is that markets would be more excited, if they see double-digit numbers. But I think nevertheless, this is not a bad performance. And I think you will see a much better trajectory, maybe from the April to June quarter. See, the interest rate cuts which have announced by RBI, plus with monsoons getting back to normal, I think Hero Motor would be one of the biggest beneficiaries if rural demand picks up in a big way. So I think, it's better to wait for maybe some more time, maybe the first half and the second half. The first half could possibly see a little bit of recovery, but the second half, if demand sustains, then I think you could see a good risk reward in Hero Motor.
I've idly thought that with inflation ebbing and the fact that loans are likely to get cheaper, there would be a better day for auto stocks, but that doesn't seem to be the case right now. Now, talk to me specifically, Avinash, about the IT sector. In fact, yesterday we saw for once the IT sector did not take the cues from NASDAQ, and even though NASDAQ was up and we had some of the blue chip NASDAQ Magnificent 7 stocks up as much as up to 7% or so, the IT sector was reeling under some pain, but things for the IT sector seem to have reversed today. Now, given whatever is happening in the world, given the proliferation of artificial intelligence and the fact that India's IT dominance in the world may not be as relevant going forward, what's your long-term view on IT stocks? Should investors hold on to them or look at other options now?
I think growth in the coming year, that is FY26, is going to be a lot challenging. And I think you have already seen that in the fourth quarter and the management commentary of most of these large companies like Wipro, TCS, Infosys. So I would say that, I would not immediately go and buy the large cap IT companies, but smaller players like KPIT, Persistent, these could be good pockets of opportunity, and that too at lower levels. My guess is that, even as of now, the US markets present a very strong opportunity for us, but I think there's yet not full clarity on the tariff side, on the order book, side, because large orders are yet in the pipeline, but nothing has materialized. So I think, FY26 is going to be challenging for the larger players. Maybe for the smaller IT run players, I think things could be a lot better. So, investors should actually look at the smaller companies where the alpha could be much better than maybe the large cap IT players.
All right. Smaller IT companies with a larger alpha. That's the message from Avinash Gorakshakar. Avinash, always a pleasure having you right here on News 9. Thank you so much for your time. And before we slip into a break, let's look at the global stories that we're following for you this Wednesday morning. US President Donald Trump secures $600 billion investment pledge from Saudi Arabia as he begins Gulf tour with major economic deal and defense pact. Trump also announces lifting of Syria sanctions at request of Saudi Crown Prince, marking major US policy shift ahead of meeting with Islamist President Ahmed al-Sara. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says US-China trade agreement creates mechanism to prevent escalation as tariffs on low-value shipments are slashed and China lifts Boeing jet ban. Like I told you, Wall Street ended mixed as Dow fell, S&P 500 gained on softer inflation data and US-China trade truce optimism showed on the markets. United Health shares plunged 15% after its group CEO Andrew Whitty steps down unexpectedly and company puts 2025 forecast citing rising medical costs and ongoing challenges. Indian origin Anita Anand sworn in as Canada's new foreign minister as Prime Minister Mark Carney reshuffles cabinet to reshape US ties, pledges spending cuts and economic shift. SoftBank posts first annual profit in 4 years at $7.7 billion. Turnaround boost investor sentiment amid new AI investment spree and lingering market risks. The number has gone up. Nissan unveils major cost cuts with 11,000 more job losses as profit plunges 88%. New CEO focuses on turnaround amid US-China sales dip and failed merger with Honda. Legend actor Robert De Niro receives Lifetime Achievement Palme d'Or from Leonardo DiCaprio at the 78th Cannes Film Festival. Kicks off with gala ceremony and stricter dress code banning nudity and oversized outfits. These stories and more on the other side. You are watching Morning Brief at 9.
Operation Sindoor. Precision, courage, sacrifice. India's finest on India's front line.
India is giving a strong response to Pakistan's provocations, shooting down 50 of their drones. Our air defense system has so far intercepted all the attacks made on it successfully.
India is now well within its right to be able to give a bigger and a better response to every single move of Pakistan.
Every move mission critical. Every heartbeat nation first. News 9 salutes the Indian Armed Forces.
Armed forces are facing a situation like this and they've really risen up to the occasion.
You are in the hands of a very, very professional military.
The BSF, the CRPF, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, they are also answered in full measure and then some.
Unflinching, unmatched, unbreakable. News 9 with those who serve always.
Operation Sindoor was unleashed, launched a precision military response targeting terror camps deep inside Pakistan.
This has to be now an all-out war against Pakistan's proxy war.
Things are heating up everywhere. Rawalpindi has also been hit.
Pakistan seems to be out of options right now.
Terror shall not go unanswered. Operation Sindoor is still on.
You're watching News 9. Let's bring you all the global stories that we're following this Wednesday morning right here on Morning Brief at 9. In a major economic move, US President Donald Trump signed a strategic partnership deal with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman during a meeting in Riyadh on Tuesday. The agreement, worth $600 billion, spans key sectors including energy, defense and mining. Now, kicking off his tour of the Gulf nations, Trump praised the Crown Prince as wise and emphasized the strength of their bilateral ties. Take a look.
US President Donald Trump secured a $600 billion investment pledge from Saudi Arabia on Tuesday as the oil power rolled out the purple carpet for him at the start of his first official overseas trip since returning to the White House. Riyadh is his first stop on a tour of wealthy Gulf states aimed at drumming up trillions of dollars in investments.
My friend, we've had a tremendous relationship over the years.
During a meeting with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, also known as MBS, Trump hailed their relationship and praised him as wise. They then signed an economic partnership deal covering energy, defense, mining and other areas. According to the White House, Saudi Arabia's commitment to invest in the United States includes what it said was the largest defense sales agreement between the allies, worth nearly $142 billion. Trump has been joined on his trip by a group of U.S. business and banking leaders, including billionaire Elon Musk and OpenAI's Sam Altman. Saudi Arabia has been seeking to cut its dependence on oil revenue. It's aiming to position itself as a leading center for artificial intelligence outside the U.S. The two countries have maintained strong ties for decades based on an arrangement that sees the kingdom delivering oil and the superpower providing security in exchange. The Crown Prince's relationship with Trump has been smoother than with his predecessor Joe Biden. Their ties were strained by the 2018 killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul's Saudi consulate. U.S. intelligence said they believe the killing was ordered by MBS. He has denied involvement. Trump will head to Qatar on Wednesday and the United Arab Emirates on Thursday. The president has not included Israel on his schedule. Israeli officials have put a brave face on Trump's decision, but there are growing doubts in Israel about its position in his priorities as frustration mounts in Washington over the failure to end the war in Gaza.
All right, and staying with Donald Trump's visit to the Gulf nations, in another major development, US President Donald Trump announced that he will lift sanctions on Syria at the request of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The move marks a major shift in the US's approach to Syria ahead of Trump's anticipated meeting with Syria's Islamist President Ahmad al-Shara. The decision signifies the deepening influence of US-Saudi ties on regional policy and comes as Trump seeks broader strategic gains during his Gulf tour. Take a look.
In a major U.S. policy shift, President Donald Trump said on Tuesday he would order the lifting of sanctions on Syria at the behest of Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince.
They've had their share of travesty, war, killing, many years. That's why my administration has already taken the first steps toward restoring normal relations between the United States and Syria for the first time in more than a decade.
Trump made the surprise announcement at the start of a tour of Gulf Arab states that began in Saudi Arabia. A sanctions reprieve would be a huge boost for Syria's Islamist president and former al-Qaeda commander Ahmad al-Shara, who was looking to stabilize a country shattered by more than a decade of civil war. The White House and two Syrian presidential sources said Trump is set to say hello to Shara on Wednesday in Saudi Arabia. Trump said he made the decision after discussions with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, whose governments have both strongly urged the lifting of sanctions.
Now it's their time to shine. It's their time to shine. So I say good luck, Syria. Show us something very special.
The United Nations, which has been pushing countries to lift sanctions on Syria, welcomed the move.
It was important for us to see relief on sanctions on Syria.
The U.S. imposed sanctions during Bashar al-Assad's rule. The sanctions cut Syria off from the global financial system and deterred foreign investment and trade, hampering efforts to rebuild from the war. Damascus residents celebrated Trump's decision. It feels like a mountain has been lifted off our chest, said this local. Trump's announcement comes despite Israel's deep suspicion of Sharah's administration. Israeli officials have continued to describe Sharah as a jihadist. Sharah was, for years, the leader of al-Qaeda's official wing in the Syrian conflict. He first joined al-Qaeda in Iraq, where he spent 5 years in a U.S. prison.
And staying with news from the Gulf, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, speaking in Saudi Arabia, said a new agreement with China has created a mechanism to prevent further trade escalation. His remarks come as the White House announced it will cut the de minimis tariff on low-value shipments from China, marking a key step in easing tensions between the two economic giants. Meanwhile, reports say Beijing is also expected to lift its ban on Chinese airlines purchasing new jets from US Boeing. Take a look.
A day after news of the US-China agreement on trade, there were signs of further steps being taken. Speaking in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the agreement had created a mechanism to avoid escalation. He said the US did not want to see a general decoupling of the two countries' economies.
What we want is the US is going to decouple in strategic industries, which we saw during COVID. We had become woefully non-self-sufficient.
The new agreement set a 90-day pause under which most of the levies recently imposed would be drastically reduced. Among concrete steps, Washington said late Monday it would slash the levies imposed on so-called de minimis shipments, low-value packages that used to be duty-free. The US had hiked tariffs on the parcels to 120%, but will now bring them back down to 54%. That's likely to be a boost for online giants like Temu and Shein, which have built their rapid growth on the de minimis provision. However, a minimum flat fee of $100 will remain in place. In a further move, China has removed a ban on its airlines taking delivery of Boeing jets. That's according to Bloomberg News, which says the move follows the trade agreement. There was no comment on the report from Boeing or Beijing. Excitement over the trade deal initially lifted global stocks on Tuesday, but some of the optimism later waned, with equities in Shanghai closing broadly flat. Economists pointed out that the agreement still leaves average tariffs significantly higher than they were before the turmoil began.
All right, and shifting focus now, Canadian politician Anita Anand has been sworn in as the Canadian new foreign minister in a major cabinet reshuffle by Prime Minister Mark Carney. Indian origin Anita Anand, who has previously served in roles including Canada's defence minister, has replaced Melanie Joly, who had been moved to the role of Minister of Industry. Mark Carney, who took office last month after campaigning to push back against US President Donald Trump's tariffs, introduced the new cabinet aimed at reshaping Canada's ties with the US. Now, speaking in Ottawa, Carney said the 29-member team, down from 39 under Justin Trudeau, would help define a new chapter in US-Canada relations. The new Prime Minister has also vowed to cut public spending while investing billions to reduce Canada's reliance on the US economy. Listen in to what the Prime Minister said.
Canadians elected this new government with a strong mandate to define a new economic and security relationship with the United States and to build a stronger economy for all Canadians. Canadians also sent a clear message that their cost of living must come down.
Japan's Nissan Motors is taking another hard turn in its recovery plan. The company announced it will cut 11,000 additional jobs and scale back production as it tries to course correct after a year of deep turmoil. More details in this report.
Nissan unveiled sweeping new cost cuts on Tuesday. The Japanese automaker confirmed it would cut 11,000 more jobs and slim down production. Nissan also saw its profit almost wiped out in the year that just ended. Operating profit hit $472 million in the 12 months to March, a decline of 88% from the previous year. The automaker also held off on releasing estimates for the financial year just starting. The results come at the end of a difficult year as the company fights to turn itself around. Nissan has been hurt by weakening sales in the US and China. It also saw merger talks with Honda collapse and was recently forced to replace its chief executive. New CEO Ivan Espinosa said Tuesday the company would look to focus on profitability and rely less on volume.
We have a mountain to climb from the losses we are announcing today. As our path forward, the Re-Nissan recovery plan is an action-based, grounded in reality and driven plan by determined actions.
The new job cuts will bring Nissan's total workforce reduction to around 20,000 jobs. It previously announced plans to cut 9,000 positions. Rival Honda did reveal its forecast for the current financial year, but it wasn't a glowing look ahead. It projected a 59% fall in profit due to uncertainty over US President Donald Trump's tariffs. It also puts a plan on hold to build an electric vehicle supply chain in Canada. Honda's forecast is the latest sign of the challenges car makers face with US tariffs on foreign-made automobiles, all while the industry sees the rise of Chinese EV producers.
And finally, a standing ovation at Cannes Film Festival, which kicked off on May 13th as screen legend Robert De Niro receives the Palme d'Or for Lifetime Achievement. The 81-year-old actor was honored by none other than Leonardo DiCaprio, his co-star in Killers of the Flower Moon. Here's a moment from the opening night at the 78th Cannes Film Festival. And with that, it's a wrap right here on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. I'll see you again tomorrow, but do stay tuned to News 9. Thanks very much for watching.
India-Pakistan, tensions erupt. Operation Sindoor underway. Speculation everywhere, but truth only here. News 9, no noise, only news.
उड़ी सेक्टर में इस समय हम मौजूद हैं और लगातार उड़ी सेक्टर में शेलिंग